She held a wallet fat with cash while her daughter's inhaler wheezed its last empty gasp, the sound like a child's hope turning inside out. Rent due, the fridge yawning. Her fingers shook, but she dialed the number on the business card anyway. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The weight of a wallet. The elevator at the Gulliver Hotel still stank faintly of bleach and spilled cognac when Alina Torres found the wallet. It had fallen halfway under a brass railing and stopped against a clump of gray dust that looked too much like a storm cloud. She was moving fast, always cleaning and moving and making room for everyone else's footprints, so she didn't notice the wallet until the elevator doors sighed open and sunlight knifed through the lobby glass. Something gleamed. Leather, a corner. She crouched. The thing was heavy in her palm, dense as a confession. Inside, money too much. Not the kind of wad that belonged to a tourist tossing tips like confetti. This was thick and precise. The bills rubber-banded, wrapped in anonymity, and a business card tucked behind a photo of something that snagged her breath, a little boy in a red sweater with hair the color of rust, his small hand gripping a sleeve that wasn't a parent's. The sleeve had a logo on it, Thorn Chem, a tang of green over gray. The logo rang a quiet bell in her head, fluorescent river, coughing children, the smell that dragged through their neighborhood like a ghost most nights. She turned the card in her hand, Victor Hale, in clean serif letters as if even his name had been ironed. Address, the Thorn Building. Phone, a number with a hurricane of zeros. Will you, Lena? The voice crackled through her Bluetooth, Alma's school. The nurse. Alina's daughter's teacher had a softness that often hardened at the wrong times. She's wheezing again. Do you have her inhaler refill? Alina swallowed. Today, I get it today. Click, pause, life daring her. The money quivered in her hand, not from movement but from what it could do. Late rent 2 months, Alma's inhaler, groceries that weren't beige and powdered. A new pair of shoes for the winter so Alma's feet wouldn't turn wet and sour inside cracked sneakers. The idea of relief rushed through her body like a fever she wanted to keep. She actually felt her spine slacken. Then the image of her own mother in their kitchen, wringing dishwater out of a towel, mouth a hard line, we do not keep what is not ours. Repeat it. We do not keep what is not ours. Alina slid the business card back into the wallet. The elevator doors side closed on their own. She went back to work, and the money felt like someone watching her back every time she bent to wipe a footprint, every time she wrung a rag. She took an early break at 3 and stood in the alley behind the hotel, the smell of old orange peels and coffee grounds and oil fried too long. The sun was too white to be warm. She dialed the number. Each ring was a heartbeat. She almost hung up at the end of the 8th ring, and then the call answered. Victor Hale. The voice was older than the card, slightly breathless as if he'd been climbing stairs or running. Hi, Mr. Hale, She couldn't say cleaner, so she said, I found your wallet. Silence, then a small sound, a relieved exhale that almost made her smile. Thank God, where? I can bring it to you after my shift, 5 o'clock, Thorn Building. Please, he said, and then after a beat so soft she knew he was speaking to himself, please. When Alina ended the call, she looked at the alley, graffiti and cracked asphalt and a cat tiptoeing with that sassy, fragile dignity cats have, and she waited for the look in her daughter's eyes to burn out of her mind. Alma, 9, so brave about her lungs. Alma, who had learned to smile around a cough. She put the wallet back in her bag, zipped it so the zipper teeth felt like a promise. The rest of her shift, she barely let her fingertips brush it. Twice she caught herself reaching into her bag for an answer that would buy her one good night's sleep. Twice she pulled her hand out like she'd touched a stove. By 5, her nerves were singing. The Thorn Building belonged to another city and was arrogant enough to admit it. Glass that turned the sky into something expensive. Marble floors, a receptionist whose smile sat on her face like a brooch. Alina kept her head up, because if she looked at the floor it would mean she had already decided what she was worth. The elevator hissed, sleek and scentless. She watched numbers swap places. She stood very still, and the silence made her remember she was carrying a small crime she hadn't committed. The doors opened on a lobby with a single long window that let the river slice the twilight into pieces. He was already waiting. He turned when the elevator whispered. He was not the man she'd imagined. No pinstripe armor, no smug face. He wore a rumpled gray suit and a shirt his daughter had probably bought him 4 Christmases ago. His hair had gone white in a hurry. The skin around his eyes had thinned until it looked too fragile for blinking. He had the look of someone who had loved too late and thanked too little. Mr. Hale, Alina said. He nodded. His eyes were river water blue. They kept flicking to her bag the way a hungry person watches a kitchen door. You, he swallowed. Thank you for calling me. She handed him the wallet. He reached like a man reaching for the hand of somebody falling. It was almost painful to watch the reunion. He opened it as if the money might have changed its mind and escaped. The rubber bands stretched, the edges whispered. He sagged a little, then straightened, his mouth the brief quiver of a boy about to apologize for something he didn't do. He looked at her. Keep it. The word was absurd and huge in the glass room. Alina blinked. I'm sorry. Keep it, he said again, quietly, a flood pulled into a whisper. It's yours. You did the right thing. It's yours. Or he looked away, his jaw working. No. I don't know. Maybe it's… He shook his head as if clearing flies. You found it. Keep it. She stared at the money. Her heart gave a greedy little lurch, traitorous, then steadied. No, it's yours. Not anymore. He pushed the wallet toward her like it weighed too much. I don't want it. Then give it to someone who… She bit the end off the sentence. Everyone wanted it. She wanted it. But she didn't want it on these terms. Nothing about the way he held himself said reward. He looked like a man trying to wash his hands after the sink stopped working. Alina stepped back, the marble cold even through the soles of her shoes. She lifted her chin because she knew that if she let it wobble for a second he would see right through to the need in her. I can't keep it. It's not mine. I brought it back because I didn't want it. He nodded once, and not like he believed her. He nodded like he believed she was a better story than he deserved to hear. He breathed out. The sound was a collapse. Thank you, he said again, and this time there was something behind the word, a shape like sorrow. He put the wallet into his jacket pocket with a small shudder, as if he'd wrapped a snake in silk. Alina watched his fingers. They trembled. She had an instinct about people. It was how she kept tips coming and trouble away. Instinct told her this man was perched on a plank above the coldest water of his life, and the wallet was both the plank and the weight pulling him under. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Alma's name lit up the screen. Alina flinched. The last of her grace was always reserved for that ringtone. He saw the flinch and the quick apology in her eyes. Go, he said softly. Thank you for coming. She rode the elevator down like you descend through memory. All this glass, she thought, and still you can't see through people. At the lobby, she stopped in the shadow of a plant too green to have ever been outside. She answered the call. Alma didn't sound panicked, just tired. Mom. Miss Garcia gave me the spare inhaler. Can you bring the refill home? On my way, Alina said, and the city slid around her like a wet coat when she stepped into the street. It was only when the next morning's headlines bloomed small, a blip, buried beneath a picture of a mayor holding an infant, that she recognized his name again. Former safety officer links Thorn Kem to river dumping, no charges filed. Her stomach pulled tight. She read the small print with eyes that didn't blink and a jaw clenched until it ached. Victor Hale, now retired, had testified 2 years ago before the city council that Thorn Chem's No. 5 plant had been releasing treated wastewater above legal chemical thresholds for years. It's harmless, a spokesman had told the council. Within guidelines. The council had nodded, mouths petals soft, eyes like winter. But this was not the story of a company's bad manners. It was a story about the river she had watched Alma gaze at from their window as if it was a road they'd lost the map to. It was a story about nights when the air tasted faintly metallic and Alma coughed and coughed until the inhaler made a loose wheeze like a toy giving up. Alina felt the world rearrange in small ways, the logo on the sleeve, his face too full of private weather, the river behind him slicing light in the window, his voice telling her to keep it like the idea of money nauseated him. The money in that wallet was a piece of something rotten. Chapter 2, the long bridge. Alina didn't go to the Thorn building. She went to the river. It was a valley day. Everything felt lower, hushed. The bridge that everyone called long even though it had another name strung the two halves of the city together like someone had lined them up and dared them to shake hands. She found him near the middle, hands on the railing, staring into the gray water where it braided itself around pillars, stained a darker, truer gray. Mr. Hale, she called. He didn't move. For a heartbeat, Alina saw how easy it would be, a foot up and over, the body following the idea before the mind could call it back. Of course, she told herself later, she had exaggerated. She had let the river write a melodrama and turned him into a character. But in the red-gray of that morning and the quiet white of the water, her heart hammered and her voice came out too loud. Victor, he turned slowly. He was all edges and cardigans and bone. He didn't seem surprised to see her. I read the article, she said, and I thought your wallet, the way you… She stopped because it felt like she had followed him into a confession without knocking. It's a good bridge, he said. I watched them build it. I remember when it looked like a skeleton. I was young enough to think everything still had meat in it. He smiled in a way that made her chest hurt. What do you want, Miss Torres? She said. Alina, what do you want, Miss Alina Torres? I want you not to put that money in a hole inside you and call it redemption. He laughed, surprised. His mouth, like everyone's, was kinder when it forgot itself. People always want me to name it. They want me to say bribe or settlement or bonus so they can decide what it makes me. It's all of those. He looked down at the river so long she wanted to grab his sleeve and pull him back. Mostly, he said, it's cowardice wrapped in eights. How much? She stopped. It wasn't her business, and still it mattered. His eyes answered anyway. 80,000, he said. Over time, some in checks for consulting, some in cash. That, he tipped his chin, the barest shift. In the wallet, 8,000. I've been carrying it like a piece of someone else's heart. For what? The wind hit her face the way grief does when it's finally allowed to arrive. He kept his body against the railing, but his voice moved closer to her. After the hearing, I had a choice. Shut up and move to Florida or stay and testify again when the civil suits started. They made an offer, not in those words, gifts disguised as considerations for my privacy and to avoid legal unpleasantness. My wife was sick, sicker than we told anyone. His throat worked. I told myself I wasn't letting them buy me. Only lease. And then Ruth died 6 months later, and there I was, with a house full of machines that made no sound and an account full of zeros. You can't spend money like that without smelling the river on it. I put a lot of it away. Gave some to my daughter when her house flooded, donated some, thought about setting it on fire 100 times. That, he tapped his chest, the wallet-shaped defaulting, is what's left in cash, petty, my petty penance. It felt like some kind of gesture to give it away, to let it be stolen. And telling a stranger to keep it, Alina said, would prove to you that you're not a thief. The wind pushed his hair into a storm. Maybe, he said softly, or maybe I wanted to see someone do the right thing and hoped the light would touch me. I thought if you kept it and spent it on something that mattered, it would look less like blood. It was cold enough that Alina could see her words leave her mouth. Who told you that if someone else somewhere got groceries it would wash you clean? Nobody, his face said. No one needed to. When you're drowning, any plank looks like salvation, even if it's a piece of the ship that sank you. He looked back at the river. It doesn't matter, I can't move past this. Every morning I wake up and think of those nights when the water smelled electric. I think about my Ruth. The way she laughed at the TV commercials, the way she forgave easily and often until the cancer taught her what to hold. I think about the boy who died and how they said it was an allergy. His mouth hardened. They counted on us to be tired and malleable. They were right. And now, Alina said, and now some nights I come here and wait for the bridge to tell me what to do. Alina sided up to him, her hips against the railing, her hands gripping cold iron. She stared into the river that had once upon a childhood smelled like rain and sun and minnows, and now smelled faintly of a science lab and wet pennies. I have a daughter, she said. Alma, her lungs argue, the worst nights are the ones that smell like your company's air. And yes, I know that's not how one proves things. I'm just a woman who uses bleach to erase your ballroom scuffs, but I know a ghost when it sleeps in my house. I know a choking when it wakes. He turned to her. He didn't look at her the way men sometimes did, that quick inventory with all the prices. He looked like a man at the fence of his best thought, asking if he dared. I'm sorry, he said. The two words were too small for the need behind them. You want to know a joke? No one ever taught me what to do with sorry. You do something with it, Alina said. You don't throw it in the river. He nodded, and the nod looked like it cost him. I have documents, he said. Emails, numbers, it's enough, or maybe not enough, but more than a rumor. I promised myself when Ruth died I would do something that mattered, and then grief made me soft and quiet. Then yesterday, there you were. He shook his head, a helpless laugh trapped inside. And I thought, for the first time in a long time, maybe I can hand some of this to someone else. Maybe she'll be braver than me. I have a job, Alina said, and a daughter. This wouldn't be your fight, he said, a lie they could both see through. She put a hand on the railing and squeezed until her fingers hurt. I'm not taking your money, Mr. Hale, she said. But I'll take your evidence. Why? Because keeping the money makes me the end of the story, and I am so tired of being the end of everything. He closed his eyes. His shoulders jumped once like a man who has been allowed to cry and doesn't know how. I know a reporter, he said, not a big one, but honest. His name is Price. Okay, Alina said. It sounded like bravado because it had to. Okay, he opened his eyes. In them, light made its quiet, fragile return. I'll call him, he said. But first, he took the wallet out and held it toward her again. Not to keep, he said quickly when she stiffened. To hold so I don't roll away from this again. Alina took it. It weighed differently this time. It felt less like money and more like a story trying hard to be told. Chapter 3. The house with the blue door the neighborhood Alina lived in had decided one winter that the cure for sadness was color. It didn't work, and still, the doors and stoops and window boxes had bloomed like bandages. Alina's apartment sat behind a blue door chipped in a way that made it look like it had been crying lightly for a decade. Alma had taped drawings along the wall, endless oceans and wolves and houses with unwise proportions. Alina did not have the courage to take them down or the money to properly frame even one. Alma was waiting at the table, homework spread like a battle plan. She looked up, the stubborn spark of a child who would be good at surviving too early. "Hi, Mommy." Alina kissed her. Alma's forehead was cool. Her eyes had that soft shine they got when the day had been longer than she was. "You look like you fought a dragon," Alina said. "I bet you should see the dragon," Alma said. Then her gaze snagged on the wallet in Alina's hand. "What's that?" "Something grown up," Alina said, "and a mistake someone made that they're trying to fix." "Like you made me give back the lady's carrot cake," Alma said seriously. "After I licked the frosting?" "Exactly like that," Alina said, and then smiled with her real mouth because Alma always anchored her to the simplest table. Knight sat down slowly against the windows. Alina made rice and beans and eggs, the ones that turned the whites lacy. They ate with the television news murmuring, the anchor's voice hushed into seriousness by a tornado 3 states away. A name slid across the bottom of the screen, Thorn Kem, and Alina felt the skin on her arms shimmer once, as if the house had been plunged into a cold river. "Mom," Alma said, "are you listening?" "I am," Alina said, and meant it. Even with a storm of grown-up choices waiting, this house, this girl, these were the first and last pages of her every book. "Tell me again about the dragon." Later, after Alma was asleep with her mouth open a little, one hand on her chest like she was pledging allegiance to her own breath, Alina stood with the wallet in the kitchen. The light over the sink made a yellow circle around her hand. She opened it. The money said nothing. Money never does. The business card glowed with its tidy font. The boy in the red sweater looked out from the photograph with the serene eyes of children in pictures. Alina touched the edge of the photo and felt something like heat from it, as if the past still carried a little of the days it held. She pulled the number Price had texted her out of Victor earlier that afternoon and wrote it on an old electricity bill envelope. The phone rang 5 times. A voice answered. "Price." "I have a story," Alina said. The sentence trembled but didn't break. "What kind?" "The kind people stop their cars in the middle of the street to read and don't care if anyone honks." He laughed, one sharp bark that sounded like he had forgotten how. "Can you meet?" They met 2 nights later at a diner where the coffee tasted like a secret you couldn't share and the waitress had the tired, miraculous grace of a saint. Victor slid into the booth after Alina and not quite opposite her, as if he didn't trust his spine to handle a direct angle. Price arrived late, hair like a lawn that had been mowed in a hurry. They spoke for 3 hours. Victor unfolded parts of his life with hands that tensed each time, then relaxed like someone turning a key in a stiff lock. Alina filled in the neighborhood side, the smell, the coughs, the foam that sometimes clung to the shoreline like lace nobody wore anymore. Price took notes in a green-backed notebook. He asked good questions, too many, too few. When Victor hesitated, Alina could almost see the images in his head, the meeting room with the long table and the coffee that tasted like contempt. The way the legal counsel had looked at him the day he'd been asked for discretion and had said the word in a way that made it rhyme with nurse. When they parted, Price said, "If I can't sell it to the paper, I can write it on my own, but someone will threaten someone. That's how this works." Alina put the wallet back under her coat and felt the weight like a child you try to carry across a stream. Chapter 4 offers. The first offer arrived in the form of a phone call that pretended it didn't know Alina didn't have a lawyer. "Miss Torres, I represent." The voice corrected itself. "I am calling from Thorn Kem. I'm calling to thank you for your community concern." Alina was at the sink, scrubbing a pan that did not want to remember it had ever been silver. "Are you," she said, "a person?" "Yes," the voice said, offended. "We understand that rumors can cause anxiety and stress to families. We have programs." "Alina," the voice said in Alina's skull because it sounded like Alma on the nights when the cough won. "Ask them for more." "We're not a charity," the voice on the phone said. "We have responsibilities. We take them seriously." "What kind of programs?" Alina said, sipping the cold line of sarcasm and letting herself harden. "The kind where you tell us to keep it and we say no, or the kind where you pretend the money has no smell." The voice paused long enough to remind her there was a person behind it, a person with a job and a family and reasons. "Miss Torres," it said slowly, "there are guidelines. If you find yourself in any financial hardship, for example, that we could assist with." It happened before she knew it was happening. A quick glance at the sink, at the pan, at the rent taped in her mind like a threat. The inhale that made her chest snag, then she hung up. She did it with a calm she didn't feel. She stood there, holding her disobedience in her fist. Then she realized the pan had started shining again, and the line of silver running through it looked like something you aim for across a body of water. She texted Price they called. He wrote back, of course they did. Alina thought that 2 sentences could be a friendship if they were the right kind. The second offer arrived in an envelope at work, slid into her locker. No letterhead, just 6 words on a paper so dense it felt almost expensive. Don't make yourself the story. Call. The phone number had too many eights. It wasn't an instruction. It was a prayer disguised as a threat. She tore it up and threw the pieces away in 3 different trash cans. Later that night, she found the number scribbled on her wrist in pen that did not belong to her. She washed until the skin protested. She swore she could still see the curve of an 8. Chapter 5. The hurt. They hurt him first because he had given them his address by telling the truth in public. Victor's mailbox had once been painted green. It chipped in long strips like a slow burning fire. He opened it that afternoon after Finders of the Courage burn out, and the bucket of paint inside turned everything it touched into a silent cartoon. His suit. His shoes. His car side window. The note inside the paint bucket was short: retire from your heroics. Take up golf. Victor's hands shook so badly when he called Alina she almost didn't understand him. She drove to his house with Alma strapped in the back seat, asleep, mouth slack. She drove the way a parent drives when the GPS says the destination is a hospital and you can see it on the map but still doubt it exists. His house was one of those tired beauties with a porch that could hold all the family storybooks of June. The other mailboxes on the block watched in their quiet metal way while Victor stood on his stoop, hands held out like a surgeon except they were painted green. Alina walked up, and for the first time she noticed how loneliness sits on a man like a coat he never actually takes off because he doesn't know he's wearing it. He laughed when he saw her, and it wasn't a joyful sound. I didn't even know anyone still made this color, he said. Kermit's Revenge. Get inside, Alina said, before the neighbors decide you're a modern art exhibit. He sat at his kitchen table while she scrubbed. The sink water turned into a greenish sea. I told you, he said eventually. They play dirty, but not. He looked at his hands. Not like that, childish. Childish can still bruise, Alina said. You know the difference between a child and a corporation? He looked at her because he wanted to laugh but couldn't decide if he should. One of them grows up, she said. He did laugh then. The sound got stuck in the pipes of the house the way the paint had. When she left, she saw Alma's face in the rearview mirror, awake now, quiet, her eyes water bright not from tears but from the big thinking children do when they sense their world is about to have its behind-the-scenes explained. Mommy, she said, can we move? To where? To a place where the river is a friend. Alina didn't lie. She didn't tell her they would. She said, we'll make it one. That night Price called. He had something. The first piece ran 2 days later. It wasn't a bomb. It was a lit match carried into a room full of bad air. People clicked. People shared. People breathed shallow because they recognized the smell of something they had suspected for a long time. Women at the laundromat told Alina they had seen it. Men at the bus stop said nothing but nodded to her like they were confirming she could carry the thing she had picked up. The landlord asked, "You're not going to bring trouble, are you?" And Alina answered, "If you mean rent, yes," and walked away because she had already paid too much with her apologies. The company responded with denials and diagrams. Victor's face caught a corner of the news website, older and hurt. Someone at the plant posted his address online. At dawn the next morning, his porch had a dead fish on it and a bouquet of daisies. Alina stared at the combination and felt a new thing, that the people behind these small, cowardly acts had been children once. People had loved them then. The thought didn't help. It made her angrier. Chapter 6. The door at work. They fired her. Of course they did. Not with malice at first, with paperwork. It was the way it happens when a company learns your name for the wrong reasons. The manager, Pete with the trimmed beard that once had seemed kind, called her into the office that smelled like coffee and new ink. "We're restructuring the schedule," he said. "Your shifts have been inconvenient." "Which hours are convenient?" Alina asked, keeping her voice smooth, a lake when a dam is doing the real work. He made a sympathetic noise that sounded like someone stepping on a squeaky toy. "Talk to Janine about your options." Janine folded her mouth around the word options and bit. "We can keep you on call," she said, "but not with benefits." "I don't have benefits," Alina said. Janine blinked. The blink became a silence, and the silence became the kind of quiet that stands between two people like a pane of glass. "Then this won't change much for you," she said, and the lie hung in the room like a ghost afraid to leave. Alina went home with a cardboard box that contained less of her life than you would expect. A mug with a crack, a little plant that had tried, a photograph of Alma, curly-haired and gap-toothed, all future. She set the box on the kitchen table, put her hands flat on either side, and let herself stare out the window for 3 minutes. Then she stood and reached for the list she kept taped on the fridge, the one labeled "When." When things went wrong, when the inhaler ran out, when the check bounced, when the glass broke and you needed to find something else to stand on. She called the woman named Rosa who hired for night shifts at the grocery store. She called the school to tell them she might be late with a payment. She texted Price and then, impulsively, Victor. Victor's text came back, quick, I'm sorry, I should pay you. Alina read it twice. Her first feeling was gratitude, like a hunger pang. Her second feeling took over her hand and hit no. She didn't add a smiley face. It wasn't that kind of no. Her phone rang. It was him. Alina, if I take money from you, she said, then they frame this as a transaction. A guilty old man bought a sad young woman's silence while she bought her child groceries. Then when I talk, they say it's because you stopped paying me. I will not be that movie. He was quiet long enough that she could hear the breath of the river between them. Okay, he said. I understand. He added carefully, as if his voice could insert itself into the space between her and the void, I can still help in other ways. Food, a letter, a conversation with your landlord's landlord. She smiled despite herself. We'll see, she said. Right now I need to pick up Alma and tell her we're rich in time. Tell her you're brave, he said softly. You tell me. I just did, he said, and the phone clicked like a heartbeat, finding a rhythm. Chapter 7, The Disappearing They Made Him Disappear on a Wednesday. Alina knew because she arranged to meet him at the Long Bridge at noon to hand him a jump drive Price had passed to her for safekeeping, backup of a plan. She walked to the middle where the planks looked bleached by more than sun and waited. She watched the river argue with itself for a while. A woman pushed a stroller past. Two teenage boys walked by and laughed with the kind of rough joy that made her throat sting. A man with a fishing cap nodded to her. The city clanked and sang behind them. Victor did not come. She called 3 times. His phone went to voicemail where his voice sounded like he was already apologizing. She texted. She walked to his house in a dread that felt like a stone she could not get rid of. The porch had no new insults on it. The mailbox hung crooked from one screw. She knocked. She waited. She tried the knob. It turned. Inside startled her with how ordinary it was. No overturned chairs, no dramatic echo on the floor where a body had been. A coffee cup sat on the counter, ring of brown and a skin of cooled cream. A chair had been pulled out as if someone had been about to sit and changed his mind. On the kitchen table, a small envelope with her name on it. Alina. She didn't open it. She was a woman who knew that once you know, you then have to handle what you know. She called Price. He came fast and looked around and did the thing good reporters do, made the ordinary tell him if anything had changed. Then he saw the envelope and pressed his mouth together. Open it, he said to her. She slid a finger under the flap. Inside, a key, a folded note, and a piece of an old photograph torn to show only a girl in a red skirt running past a tree. She unfolded the note. He had written small. Men who apologize always write small. Alina, he wrote, if I'm not at the bridge, it's because I finally tried to be more than afraid. There is a deposit box at and then the name of a bank with documents. Use the key. Give the wallet to Price. Do not come looking for me if I don't want to be found. The money in it, give it to someone whose lungs hurt, or throw it in the river if the river insists. I believe you will know what to do. Thank you for not taking from me what I hoped you would. Some things are ours to carry to the end. She sat down hard in his chair. The room tilted as if grief had walked in and leaned against one wall like an uninvited guest. Price swore softly. This is not good, he said. It wasn't about the documents. It wasn't about the deposit box. It was the sentence, do not come looking for me. He said it the way you say goodbye to what you love in case you accidentally outlive yourself. They called the police. It felt foolish and urgent at once. The officer took down her name like it mattered and his name like it had already and asked the kind of questions that have an answer other than the one you give. Has he ever threatened to hurt himself? There are no threats in sorrow that deep. There are forecasts. The next morning they found a body downriver. It had been a rough night, rain and wind like an argument that wouldn't quit. The body had been in the water long enough to smooth edges that people used to make themselves into who they are. They didn't show photographs. They did say it wore a suit. Alina went to the bridge and stood in the wind. She pressed her hands flat against the cold metal and told herself that wherever he was, he had finally met Ruth again, and if that wasn't the truth, then at least it was a kind lie and she would let it hold her up long enough to equalize her breath. The key cut her palm a little. She closed her hand tighter around it. The wallet was in her other hand. It should have been heavier, but now it felt like an old man's last news. She went to the bank. Chapter 8, Proof. The deposit box sat in a windowless room with a bored security guard who worked a crossword. The clerk slid the metal rectangle toward Alina as if it were empty. Alina opened it with the key and found a stack of papers thick enough to do damage and a flash drive taped to the bottom. She took them all and signed the paper that said she had taken something, and then she walked out into a day so bright it offended. She handed the package to Price in the grocery store parking lot because safety looks like a place where people are buying strawberries. He skimmed, then stopped. "Oh," he said, "sometimes a single word can be a whole chapter." "What?" Alina said. "It's not just numbers." Price showed her the top page. It was a memo written by a man whose office had a doorway and a salary to match. It mentioned thresholds and variances and a calculus that made poison into profit. Another page showed a list of names, families compensated for something not admitted. Alina recognized one, a little boy, the red sweater. The family had moved last year to a town where the river still knew its own name. Price closed the file. When he looked at Alina, his eyes had shifted in one of those ways she had learned to fear, pity pulling at the corners. "Alina," he said. "What?" "Your name is on a list," he said. "They've noted your complaint, they have you categorized. The notes say potentially litigious, likely to organize neighbors, single mother, careful with money." He made a sound that had not been his voice earlier. "They keep notes on who is careful." Alina brushed wind out of her hair. "Then let them know I am careful with everything except fear." They went to his office, small and messy and full of the smell of paper. They read aloud pieces of evil as if they needed to hear them in human voices before they could be trusted. Price wrote. He packed sentences with dynamite, data, date, name, and then wrapped them in the kind of calm that editors like because it does not get you sued. They planned the rollout, the way modern battles are fought, links and maps and teachers who told their classes to read something real. It was beautiful in a sharp, useless way, like a snowflake holding itself over a furnace. That night, someone broke the window in Alina's kitchen with accurate aim. The rock landed next to the sink with a dignity that offended her. She looked at the hole, at the glass like ice shards on her floor, at Alma's face behind her, pale but brighter than it had a right to be. "Mommy," Alma whispered. "It's only a rock," Alina said. She swept glass and cut her palm on a piece she didn't see. She wrapped the cut in the dish towel with strawberries on it. She made a call. She couldn't call the police. They would fill out a form and leave with their eyes tired. She called 5 women from the block instead. They came with rolls of heavy plastic and duct tape and the kind of stories you tell in a kitchen where the window is not a window for a night. Men came once. Phones that light up at 3 a.m. Somebody's cousin who knows where not to park. They patched the break and stayed late, and one of them leaned on the counter and said, "You need nothing, you ask anyway." And when Alma started to cough, the circle of women tightened. In the morning, Alina took the wallet and walked to the old church with the red door and the soup kitchen inside that smelled of vegetables and hope and laundry. The director, a woman named Nadia who had once been a nurse, had hands that looked like they could play piano and fix you at the same time. Alina said, "I have money, I will not keep it, it will never belong to me. Will you hold it in trust for families who are tired of hearing their children cough?" Nadia eyed the wallet, then Alina. "Where did it come from?" Alina said. "From a man who asked me to keep it." "From a river, from a company that thinks it can lean forever on our lungs." Nadia reached across the desk and took Alina's hand instead of the wallet. "You're sure?" "I am," Alina said. "To my bones." Nadia took the wallet. Her fingers didn't shake. "Then we will call it the Long Bridge Fund," she said, "and every dollar in this room will be a plank." Chapter 9, The Trial That Wasn't and the Ending That Was. You think such stories end with a courtroom and a gavel and a victory speech that sounds like it was written in a hotel room. Sometimes they do. The woman who sues and the check with too many zeros and the headline that uses the word landmark. Alina's city preferred its renaming small. They asked their victories to show up in a more modest dress. The paper ran Price's story. It did numbers he had not done in a long time. The company sent letters thick as phone books. No one would admit what they had written with their signatures. State officials promised an investigation. Inhaling those words felt like breathing through a straw. Testimonials piled up, mothers with careful eyes, dads whose hands were rougher than their grief, a grandmother who had buried a boy the size of the space between breath and name. The sound turned, the city changed keys, the river hummed low. Alina spoke once into a microphone on the steps of the building where dreams go to be bartered. Her words weren't what anyone would call polished, they were steady and ordinary. "My girl," she said, "likes to draw wolves. She draws them so they look like they have a plan. I want her to grow up in a place where the air is not something she has to fight. I want the machines in our house to be music and not medicine." People clapped in that scattered way crowds do when they understand they are being asked to do something more than clap. A week later, an outside consultant hired by the city confirmed many of Price's facts and declared others inconclusive. The plant temporarily shut down Number 5's output. Regulations were revisited. The word consent decree floated like a raft. Engineers drew new diagrams. The river kept going because that's what rivers do. Nobody ran a ribbon across it and cut a new name into its mouth. Alina got the job at the grocery store stocking shelves from midnight to 6. Then she landed another day shift with a company that cleaned offices instead of ballrooms. She slept in the seams. She watched Almer run laps at recess through the fence and tried not to count the minutes between coughs. The Long Bridge Fund bought air purifiers and covered doctor visits and not much more. It was not enough, and it was not nothing. Victor's wallet went empty slowly, and then, when someone heard and sent a check and wrote a note about a father who died in a county where the river stopped smelling like anything, it filled again. A man called Alina and offered a job in PR for a new company that wanted to prove nice things. She said no, and yes to speaking in a half-dozen rooms that smelled different and contained the same tired hope. People pressed cash into her hands sometimes. Night after night, she pressed it into Nadia's instead, like she was sending a piece of her fear out into the world to be changed into something else. The police closed Victor's file without labeling it as anything that made them look culpable. People said suicide. Others said accident. Price said in one of those quiet lines in the 5th paragraph no one quotes, "He stood on the Long Bridge the week before, and anyone who has stood on the Long Bridge and looked down knows how many stories it tells and how many it can end." One afternoon, 3 months after the first piece ran, someone spray painted on the pillar under the bridge where kids used to drink out of paper bags, "We do not keep what is not ours." Other hands later added, "But we keep each other." Chapter 10, the bittersweet after in late autumn, when the leaves threw themselves off trees with the kind of gleeful bravery Alina admired, Alma brought home an assignment. Write about a time something was lost and found. She read it, then looked at her daughter. Alma had written, "Once my mom found a wallet in a friend. She didn't keep the wallet, but she kept the friend. It turned into a fund. It smells like soup." Alina laughed out loud. It surprised her how long it had been since she had heard herself do that. She thought about taking the paper and putting it on the fridge with the magnet shaped like a tomato, and then decided the kitchen had seen enough of important paper. She tucked the essay into a drawer where she kept the birthday cards she never threw away. They walked by the river after. The air held that crispness that tells you winter is warming up its throat. Alma's hand in hers felt precise and certain. They stopped at the middle of the bridge. "Do you think he's in the water?" Alma asked, sensitive the way children are to the sharp edges adults try to soften. "I think he's where his wife is," Alina said, "and when the river wants to tell us something, it will." "Are you cold?" "A little," Alma said. "I can breathe, though." She smiled like a victor, like on a mountain. Alina leaned over the railing. The river moved like an animal with a destination. She took a penny from her coat pocket, the kind she promised herself she would not spend. She made a wish and threw it. It flashed once and was swallowed. "What did you wish?" Alma asked. "Everything," Alina said, "and something small for soup." They walked home through light that made murals out of brick. At the church, Nadia stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled to her elbows, steam painting her cheeks. "Come in," she called. "There's bread." They ate at a table with 4 other families, and a man who sang under his breath in a language Alina didn't know, and a woman who shook her head like she was still arguing with the rock that had found its way through her window in another life. A teenager with a scar above his lip asked if he could take seconds. Someone told a joke so bad it wrapped around and became good. After, when Alina stood to help wash soup bowls, Nadia put a hand on her arm. "You did good," she said. Alina shook her head. "No," she said, "we did one piece of a good thing, the rest is the work of a long time." Nadia smiled. "You keep refusing the wrong things," she said. "That's rare, keep doing it." On the way home, they passed the spot where someone had painted the words under the bridge. It had rained, the letters blurred a little. Alina wanted to kneel with a brush and make them sharp again. She thought of Victor's hands, green, shaking. She thought of her mother, a dish towel and a rule. She thought about how the rule had stretched to cover bigger things. They rounded the corner onto their block and saw their own front window, the plastic gone, replaced by glass. On the sill inside, a vase with 3 daisies. No note, no return address. The safety of it made her suspicious. The kindness of it made her forgive her suspicion. Almer ran ahead and pulled open the blue door. Inside, everything was where it should be, the couch no one had time enough to sit on. The tiny kitchen with the clever shelf Victor had put up one afternoon while insisting he wasn't handy. He had smiled when the shelf held. "There," he had said, "I made something hold." Alina went to the drawer and pulled out Alma's essay. She read the last line again, the one kids can write because they don't know better. "It smells like soup." She stood very still. Sometimes you decide to stay, you decide to build a bridge that isn't only a place to jump. Later, when the house was quiet and the city's sounds had gone into their nighttime disguises, she took the last of the money from the wallet. $200, all that was left after the families with coughs and the purifiers and the medicine, and she put it into an envelope and wrote, "For the bricklayers. For the ones who carry, for the ones who say no." She slid it under Nadia's office door before dawn. Then she walked down to the river with empty hands and watched the morning climb the sky. She said the names of the people she knew to the water like a prayer one at a time. Ruth, Victor, Alma. She named herself at the end because she had learned her name belonged in her prayers too. When the sun struck the surface, the river lit up like a truth, and for a moment, Alina thought she could see the shape of each current and where it would go and what it would carry. Then the light changed and the world went back to as it was, which was not nothing. That she was sure of now. It wasn't the kind of ending that gave you failure or triumph. Some bridges you cross once and some you spend your life on, mending and warning and naming each plank. The wallet stayed empty and became a different thing. A reminder, not a talisman. A story Alina could tell Alma when she asked why they still lived under the sky that smelled like a science experiment and how you could both curse and love a river. "Because it doesn't belong to any of us," she would say, "and we belong to it." On the day the city council finally passed the new set of rules that would make the river a little less poisonous and the air a little less cruel, Alina walked by the long bridge. Someone had tied ribbons to the rail, blue and green, enough to look like the wind had hired a carnival. Children ran with paper fish on sticks. A woman who ran a daycare cried without trying to hide it. Price stood near the pillar and looked astonished that sentences could knock on doors and be let in. Alma drew another wolf, this one with a mortgage and a garden. Nadia ladled soup into bowls and made sure everyone who wanted seconds got them. Alina stood at the rail. She wants, in that moment, to tell Victor she didn't keep the money. She wants to tell him that this isn't absolution, but it's a road. She wants to tell Ruth that it is possible to be forgiven in ways that don't look like you deserve it at all. She wants to tell her mother that the old rule holds, that nothing you steal will taste good, not ever, and also that sometimes the right thing is bigger than the rule imagined. She wants to tell her daughter that, yes, sometimes good things smell like soup. She couldn't tell any of them in the ways that would make those truths stick. So she said them out loud anyway, the river catching a few syllables and pushing them toward the ocean like a rumor it was proud to carry. Behind her, someone laughed. Beside her, Alma leaned over the rail and yelled into the water, just because children are born wanting to hear their own echoes find them again. When the echo came, a soft return, a familiar voice turned inside out, Alina felt the hair rise on her arms. A man in a gray jacket, not Victor, never Victor, reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo. He held it up to the light in that awkward way people sometimes share pasts with strangers. "He wrote me once, about what you did. I thought I should show you." The boy in the red sweater grinned out at her. The edge of the photo had been torn and then taped back together by someone who needed to believe stories could be made whole. "He was my brother," the man said. "He didn't make it to 10, but my mother moved us. He wrote my mother a check. It did not save him, but it saved her." She stopped looking at the river like a murderer and started looking at it like a road. Alina swallowed around the stone her throat had become. "Thank you," she said. She felt like every apology she had accepted without knowing it was being returned to her in a different coin. They stood together for a while, staring at a line of sunlight running across the water like a promise it intended to keep. Then the wind gusted and a ribbon snapped loose and flew. Alina reached for it on instinct and missed. Alma leapt and caught it easily. "We keep it?" Alma asked, breathless. Alina smiled. "No," she said, "tie it back." Alma nodded, and with the solemn care of someone who has learned that making sure people can find their way is the same thing as telling them the truth, she tied the blue strip of cloth tight onto the rail. It fluttered a little. It held. The river carried on, and somewhere, if belief is a real continent, a man with paintless hands and an unheavy heart walked beside his wife, both of them finally free of carrying anything but each other.